Let me try something with you. I'm going to ask you 10 simple questions. Not trick questions, not complicated math. 10 questions that any American over 50 should be able to answer without hesitation. Because these are the questions that decide whether the second half of your life is comfortable or quietly terrifying. And here's what I predict. You'll be able to answer maybe 2, maybe 3 if you've been paying attention. And when you realize how many you can't answer, you'll feel something uncomfortable, a little shame maybe, a little anger probably, because nobody ever sat you down and taught you this. Not in school, not at work, not at home. You were just expected to figure it out. Let me show you the blueprint. Because the questions you can't answer tonight are the exact ones your financial future is being built on, whether you're paying attention to them or not. Question 1. When you finally retire, whenever that is, how much will Social Security actually pay you? Not approximately, not some amount. The real number. The monthly check that's going to land in your account for the rest of your life. If you can't answer that in specific dollars, you're not alone. Most Americans over 50 can't. They have a vague feeling it'll be somewhere around a couple thousand a month. They've seen statements from the Social Security Administration at some point, but they didn't read them carefully. They filed them somewhere. They assumed it would all work out. And here's where most people get it wrong. They treat Social Security like a guaranteed floor. Something that will always be there. Something the government owes them because they paid in their whole working life. And technically, yes, they paid in. For 30, 40, sometimes 50 years, a piece of every paycheck went to that system. But what most people over 50 don't realize is that the math of Social Security is changing in real time. The system was built in the 1930s for a very different America. Back then, a worker retired at 65 and died at 68. The math worked. Today, people retire at 65 and live until 90. The math doesn't work, not without adjustments, and those adjustments are coming, whether announced loudly or quietly, whether you like them or not. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Depending on when you retire and how much you earned across your life, your Social Security check might replace 30% of your income. Maybe 40%. For most middle-class Americans, never more than half. Half. That's what the system was designed to be. A supplement, not a substitute. But somewhere along the way, millions of people started treating it as the plan instead of part of the plan. And now 20 years from the finish line, they're going to discover the hard way that it was never enough. Question 2. Do you know the difference between a 401k, a traditional IRA, and a Roth IRA? Not the basic definition, the real difference. Which one saves you the most in taxes at your specific income level? Which one benefits you most at your specific age? Which one your employer is probably offering you a watered-down version of without telling you? If your eyes glazed over just reading those 3 names, I understand. These are instruments most Americans interact with for decades without ever fully understanding. They contribute automatically. Their HR department picked a default plan. Their financial advisor, if they have one, mentioned a few things they don't really remember, and 20 years go by, and that account sits there, doing something, growing at some rate, with some tax consequence they'll discover only when they start pulling money out. This is where most people get it wrong. They assume the plan they were handed at work is the best plan for them. But employers don't build retirement plans around what's optimal for you. They build them around what's administratively simple for the company. That difference between what's available to you and what's optimal for you can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over a working life, maybe more. And I'll tell you something that nobody says out loud. The choice between a traditional and a Roth isn't just a technicality. It's a bet on the future of taxes in America. If you believe taxes will be higher in the future than they are today, one choice is clearly right. If you believe they'll be lower, the opposite is right. And that bet, which most people make without even knowing they're making it, determines how much of your lifetime savings actually belongs to you when you stop working. You don't need more money, you need a better plan, because right now, most Americans over 50 have built their retirement around two instruments they don't fully understand, in a system whose rules are changing, at a time when the margin for error is shrinking every year. That's not a comfortable thing to hear. But it's the truth. And we're only on question 2. Questions 3 and 4 go even deeper. They're about the thing that's going to quietly bankrupt more retired Americans in the next 20 years than any market crash, any inflation spike, any financial crisis combined, and almost nobody's ready for it. Question 3. When you turn 65, what exactly does Medicare cover? And more importantly, what does it not cover? Go ahead, take a moment. Most people over 50, if they're honest, have a comforting blur in their head that goes something like, Medicare kicks in at 65, and then my medical costs are taken care of. That's the story they've been told, directly or indirectly, for their entire adult life. It's the story that lets them sleep at night when they think about aging. And it's mostly a lie. Not completely. Medicare is real. It's a genuine program that millions of Americans depend on. But the gap between what people think Medicare covers and what it actually covers is one of the most dangerous financial blind spots in the country. Because Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, doesn't cover most dental work, doesn't cover hearing aids, doesn't cover vision beyond the basics, doesn't cover prescription drugs unless you specifically sign up for a separate plan, doesn't cover you outside the United States if you travel. And here's the one that really breaks people. Medicare has deductibles, copays, and coinsurance that can stack up into tens of thousands of dollars a year for someone with a serious illness. This is where most people get it wrong. They think the scary financial years are the ones where they're working, raising kids, paying mortgages. But for millions of Americans, the scariest financial decade is the one between 75 and 85. That's when the body starts needing things, surgeries, medications that cost more per month than some people's mortgages, assistance at home, eventually for many, full-time care. And the bill for that decade, the decade almost nobody plans for, routinely runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars. A single year in a nursing home in America averages over $100,000. $100,000, and most people stay for more than 1 year. You do that math, and the retirement savings that looked so impressive at 65, that $700,000, that $1 million you were so proud of, can evaporate in 3 or 4 years of care. Gone. And then what? Then the bill falls on your children, or on Medicaid, which only kicks in after you've spent almost everything you own. Question 4. Do you understand the American tax system well enough to know why someone earning $10 million a year often pays a lower effective tax rate than you do? If you've felt that something is unfair about American taxes, you're not imagining it. You're right, but the unfairness isn't what most people think. It's not that the rich pay lower rates because of shady tricks. It's that the rich pay lower rates because the tax code is designed to reward certain kinds of income and certain kinds of wealth, and to punish others. Wage income, the kind you probably earn, is taxed the hardest. Every dollar you make at a job gets hit with income tax, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, and often state and local taxes on top. You can easily lose 35–40% of your paycheck before it ever reaches your bank account. Meanwhile, capital gains, money earned from selling investments that grew in value, is taxed at a much lower rate, sometimes half, sometimes less. And dividends from certain stocks get favorable treatment. And borrowed money, remember the earlier video, isn't taxed at all. So someone with $10 million in stocks who never sells, who borrows against them to fund their lifestyle, who earns dividends that fall into the favorable category, can live better than you do while paying a fraction of your tax rate. And all of it is perfectly legal. The system is built this way on purpose. It's not a loophole. It's the design. This is where most people get it wrong. They rage at the rich without understanding the rules. But the rich didn't make the rules. They just learned them. And anyone willing to study the rules can start shifting, even a little at a time, toward the side of the tax code that rewards instead of punishes. That shift, over 20 or 30 years, separates the people who retire wealthy from the people who retire worried. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. 4 questions in. How many could you answer with confidence? And we're just getting warmed up. Because question 5, the one coming next, is about something you've already built. Something sitting right there in the background of your life, waiting for a decision you've been avoiding. Question 5. When you die, and we're all going there sooner or later, what happens to everything you own? I know. That's not a fun question. Most people over 50 push this question away instinctively, the way you swat a fly. They tell themselves they'll deal with it later. They say, I have plenty of time. They say, my spouse will figure it out. They say, my kids will sort it out when the time comes. And then years pass, decades sometimes. And one day something happens. A health scare, a friend's death, a diagnosis that wasn't expected, and suddenly the question isn't abstract anymore. Suddenly it's right there in the room, demanding an answer. Here's what most Americans don't realize. If you die without a will in this country, the government decides who gets what. Not you, not your family necessarily. The government. Based on a set of rules written by your state legislature probably decades ago, applied to everyone identically, whether or not those rules match what you would have wanted. Your house, your savings, your retirement accounts, the watch your grandfather gave you, the photos, the land, the business you built. All of it sorted by a process called probate, which can take months or years, cost thousands of dollars in legal fees, and expose every private detail of your finances to public record. This is where most people get it wrong. They think estate planning is for rich people, for families with mansions and yachts and multiple properties. It's not. Estate planning is for anyone who owns anything, anyone who cares where their life's work ends up, anyone who has people they love and want to protect from chaos after they're gone. And yet, Something like 2 out of 3 Americans over 50 don't have even a basic will. Not because they don't care, because they keep pushing the decision into the future. And here's the quiet cost of that avoidance. When someone dies without a plan, the family doesn't just grieve, they fight. Not always with yelling, not always with lawyers. Sometimes the fight is silent. A sibling who feels cheated. A child who never forgives another child for taking the wrong thing. A grandchild who doesn't receive what was promised verbally but never written down. Death without a plan is one of the most reliable ways in American life to destroy a family from the inside, not because the money matters most, because the uncertainty creates resentment that outlives the grief. Question 6. Do you actually understand how banks work? I don't mean the friendly branch on the corner with the balloons on Saturdays. I mean the machine. The real machine. The one that touches your mortgage, your savings, your credit card, your car loan, the money in your checking account every single day. Here's the thing that once you know it, changes your entire relationship with the banking system. When you deposit $1,000 in your bank, the bank doesn't keep $1,000 in a vault for you. It keeps a small fraction of that. The rest it lends out immediately to other customers, to businesses, to governments buying bonds. That's how banks make money. They pay you almost nothing on your deposit, then lend your deposit out at 5, 7, 10% to someone else, and keep the difference. If you want to know why savings accounts pay 0.5% while credit cards charge 22%, that's why. The whole business model runs on that gap. And the gap is their profit. Every dollar you leave sitting in a traditional savings account is a dollar you're quietly lending to the bank at almost zero interest, so they can lend it out at much higher interest to someone else. This is where most people get it wrong. They think the bank is a safe container. It's actually a middleman. Your money isn't sitting still. It's moving constantly, working for someone else, generating profit for the institution while you barely notice. Once you see the system for what it is, a gap between what they pay you and what they charge others, you start asking different questions, like, am I on the wrong side of this gap? And if so, how do I move to the other side? You don't need more money. You need a better plan. 6 questions in. The next 2 go straight into territory most Americans have never even thought to question. Not because it's hidden, because it's hiding in plain sight. Question 7. Do you know who actually sets the interest rate on your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card, and your savings account? Most Americans would say the bank, and they'd be wrong. The bank is only passing along a number that comes from somewhere much higher up the chain. A small group of people sitting in a room in Washington, deciding a few times a year what the cost of money will be across the entire country. They're called the Federal Reserve, the Fed, and they are, without exaggeration, one of the most powerful institutions in the world. Here's what they do in plain English. The Fed sets a benchmark interest rate. That rate trickles down through every bank, every loan, every mortgage, every credit line in America. When the Fed raises rates, your credit card bill goes up. Your mortgage becomes more expensive if you're buying a home. Businesses borrow less, hire less. The economy slows down. When the Fed lowers rates, the opposite happens. Borrowing becomes cheap. Home prices rise because buyers can afford bigger loans. The stock market climbs. Unemployment usually falls. And here's the thing almost nobody talks about. The Fed isn't elected. You didn't vote for them. You can't vote them out. They operate with what's called independence from political pressure, which sounds noble until you realize what it means in practice. It means a tiny group of economists, most of them from a handful of elite universities, quietly make decisions every 6 weeks that reshape the financial reality of 330 million Americans. Your ability to buy a house, your retirement account's performance, whether your small business expands or contracts, whether you get a raise or get laid off, all of it runs downstream from decisions made in that room. This is where most people get it wrong. They think the economy is shaped by presidents and Congress. Sure, politicians get the blame and the credit, but the real dials are being turned by the Fed. And if you want to understand why the last 20 years of American financial life have looked the way they have, the housing boom, the housing crash, the cheap money era, the inflation spike, the rate shock, you have to understand the Fed, because the Fed wasn't a bystander. The Fed was the driver. Question 8. Do you know what your FICO score actually is, and how it shapes almost every financial door that opens or closes in your life? That little 3-digit number. Most Americans have a vague sense of it. They know it's a credit thing. They know a higher number is better than a lower one. They might even know their rough score because a credit card app shows it to them. But do they understand what that number is actually doing to their life every day, whether they think about it or not? Here's the weight of that number. Your FICO score determines the interest rate on your mortgage. Between a 620 and a 780, the difference on a 30-year mortgage can be hundreds of thousands of dollars in total interest paid over the life of the loan. Hundreds of thousands. For the same house, same buyer, same job. The only variable is the number. Your FICO score determines whether a landlord will rent to you, whether an employer will hire you for certain jobs, whether you'll get approved for a business loan, whether your car insurance premium goes up or down. In some states, even whether you can get a cell phone without a deposit. And it's all calculated by 3 private companies, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, using formulas you can't fully see, based on data you didn't agree to share, with errors that can cost you thousands and take months to correct. This is where most people get it wrong. They treat their credit score like a grade on a test, something abstract, but your credit score isn't a grade, it's a multiplier. It multiplies every financial opportunity in your life, either upward or downward. Someone with a 780 lives in a completely different financial world than someone with a 620, even if their income is identical. Better rates, better approvals, better negotiating power, better everything. And nobody in school ever told you how much this number would matter. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. 8 questions in, 2 more to go. And these last 2, they touch on something most Americans over 50 have lived through but never fully understood. The invisible forces that shape the prices of everything they own, everything they bought, everything they sold. Question 9. When the government puts a tariff on products coming in from another country, steel from China, cars from Germany, electronics from Japan, who do you think actually pays that tariff? Most Americans, if you put them on the spot, would say the foreign country pays. That's the whole point, right? You put a tariff on China, China pays. That's how the speeches always sound. That's how the headlines always read. But if you understand how tariffs actually work, you know the speeches are telling you a story that isn't true. Here's what actually happens. An American company wants to import $1,000 worth of steel from China. The tariff says there's a 25% tax on that steel when it crosses the border. So when the shipment arrives in America, the American company, not the Chinese company, writes a check to the U.S. government for $250. The Chinese supplier still gets their $1,000. They don't lose a single cent. The American company just paid an extra $250 to bring the product in. Now, what does the American company do? They have two choices. They can absorb the extra cost and watch their profits shrink, or they can raise the price of whatever they make with that steel. The cars, the appliances, the buildings, the fences, the tools, and pass the cost down the chain until it reaches you. The guy at the hardware store, the family buying a new refrigerator, the person shopping for a car. And I'll give you 3 guesses which option companies pick, and the first 2 don't count. This is where most people get it wrong. They think tariffs are a weapon aimed outward. Tariffs are almost always a tax aimed inward. Every tariff, no matter how it's sold politically, ends up embedded in the price tags you see at the store. It's a tax the consumer pays without ever seeing a line item called tax on the receipt. And that's part of why it's so politically useful. People don't feel it directly. They just notice vaguely that things cost more than they used to, and they blame the usual suspects. Inflation, greed, bad luck. Rarely do they trace the price increase back to the tariff that started it. Question 10. Do you understand why the house your parents bought on a single income would now take 2 incomes and a miracle to afford? If you're over 50, you probably remember the house of your childhood, the modest 3-bedroom, the yard, the garage, the neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. Your father or your mother or both bought that house on a single working-class income, maybe 2 incomes, but nothing extraordinary. Regular people, regular jobs, regular lives, and they owned a home. Now look at your own adult children, or your nieces and nephews, or the young couples in your neighborhood, 2 college degrees, 2 full-time jobs, and a house that looks a lot like the one your parents owned is completely, impossibly out of reach. How did that happen? It wasn't one thing. It was several things happening at the same time, stacking on top of each other for 50 years. Interest rates dropped, which let buyers borrow much more. But that meant sellers could charge much more. Cities stopped building new housing at the pace of population growth, squeezing supply. Investors, corporations, hedge funds, foreign buyers started treating single-family homes as assets instead of shelter, competing against families for the same properties with all-cash offers, and wages, real wages adjusted for what a dollar actually buys, barely moved in 4 decades. Put it all together, and you get an entire generation of young Americans who work harder than their parents did, earn more on paper, and own less. Not because they're lazy, not because they buy too much avocado toast, whatever that even meant. Because the system they were born into plays by different rules than the one their parents grew up in. The rules changed, and nobody announced it. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. 10 questions. If you could answer 3 of them confidently, you're ahead of most Americans your age. If you could answer 5, you're in the top quarter. And if you couldn't answer most of them, don't feel bad. Feel informed. Because the first step to fixing something is knowing it's broken. Before we keep going, because we still have work to do before this is finished, I want to pause for a second. If you've made it this far into the video with me, if you've sat through 10 uncomfortable questions without clicking away, if you're still thinking, still honest with yourself about the answers, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and walk with us every single day. This is the kind of conversation we have here. Not surface level, not sugar-coated, not designed to make you feel good, designed to make you see clearly. If that's what you're looking for, stay. And I'll be honest with you. A video like this one isn't comfortable to make. Nobody likes being told there are 10 things they should know and probably don't. It stings a little. It's supposed to sting a little. Because the alternative, spending the next 20 years of your life assuming someone else is going to figure it out for you, stings a lot more when you hit 70 and realize nobody ever did. Now let's get back to it. Because understanding that the questions exist is only the beginning. Here's the thing nobody tells you after a video like this. The real damage isn't caused by not knowing the answers. The real damage is caused by thinking you already know them. Because when you think you already know, you stop looking, you stop studying, you stop asking. You tell yourself you've got it figured out, and you drift for another decade. And drifting in the financial world is the single most expensive thing a human being can do with their time. Most Americans over 50 don't make dramatic money mistakes. They don't blow their savings on red at the casino. They don't get scammed out of everything. They drift, quietly, politely, for years. They leave their 401k in whatever default fund their employer picked. They leave their savings in the same low-interest account they opened in 1998. They assume Medicare will cover what it won't. They assume Social Security will be enough when it won't. They assume their kids won't fight when they will. They assume everything will work out because it mostly has so far. And then somewhere around 65 or 70, reality catches up, all at once, and it hurts. This is where most people get it wrong. They think the solution is to finally start worrying more, to panic, to feel guilty about every year they didn't pay attention. That's not the solution. The solution is simpler and quieter than that. The solution is to stop drifting. Just stop drifting. That's it. You don't have to become an expert overnight. You don't have to read 20 books this year. You don't have to hire 3 financial advisors and restructure your whole life in a weekend. You just have to stop drifting. Pick one question from tonight's 10. Just one. The one that made you most uncomfortable when I asked it. Maybe it was Social Security. Maybe it was the 401k versus the Roth IRA. Maybe it was Medicare. Maybe it was what happens when you die and nobody knows what you wanted. Pick the one that landed hardest and commit this week to learning the answer. Not mastering it, not becoming an expert, just learning the answer. Spending 3 or 4 hours with it, really reading, really asking, really understanding, that's it. That's the whole first step. Because here's the truth about the second half of your life. It doesn't require genius. It doesn't require luck. It doesn't require starting over. It requires attention. Attention to the questions you've been avoiding. Attention to the details you've been trusting other people to handle. Attention to the rules of a game you've been playing your whole life without ever stopping to read the instructions. If you fix this, everything changes. And I want to make you a promise before we close this out. Every single one of these 10 questions, every one of them, is going to become its own full video on this channel in the coming weeks. Each one deep, honest, at the same length and the same depth as this one. Because the questions deserve real answers, not footnotes. And if you subscribe now, you'll get every one of them as they come out. No fluff, no hype, just 10 honest conversations that might reshape the next 20 years of your life. And now, let me bring this home. Here's what I want you to sit with before you close this video. You spent the last hour with me answering 10 questions, or trying to, or realizing you couldn't. And somewhere in that hour, something happened that most videos don't do. Something mattered. Not because I said anything brilliant. I didn't. Not because the information was new. Most of it wasn't. What mattered is that, for the first time in a long time, somebody asked you to think about the shape of your own financial life, not in pieces, not in fragments, as a whole. And that's rare. That's genuinely rare. Because most of life, especially after 40, is lived inside a kind of financial fog. You wake up, you go to work, you pay the bills that arrive, you save when you can, you spend when you have to, you handle the immediate. And the immediate, stacked up over 20 or 30 years, becomes a lifetime. A lifetime where, somewhere along the way, nobody ever pulled you aside and said, hey, let's look at this thing together. Let's see the whole picture. Let's ask the questions that actually matter. Nobody did that for you. And nobody was ever going to. Not your employer, not the government, not the financial industry, which profits from your confusion, not even, most of the time, your own family. Because most of your own family is drifting right alongside you, hoping someone else figured it out. That's the quiet truth of American financial life. Everyone is pretending everyone else has a plan. And almost nobody does. So here's the question that matters more than the 10 I asked you tonight. The real question, the one underneath all the others. Are you going to keep drifting, or are you going to start paying attention? Because there's no shame in not knowing the answers to the 10 questions. There's only shame in refusing to learn them from here on out. And the difference between those two paths, drift or attention, is the difference between retiring at 65, worried about running out, and retiring at 65 with the quiet confidence of someone who finally understood the game. You're old enough now. You've lived enough. You've earned enough scars to know that nobody is coming to save you. Not because the world is cruel, because the world is just busy, and nobody ever had the job of saving you in the first place. You have to save yourself. And saving yourself doesn't require brilliance. It requires attention. One question at a time, 1 week at a time, one decision at a time. So pick your question, the one that stung the most tonight. Learn the answer. Then pick the next one, and the next. And in a year, just a year, you won't recognize the person you are when you look at your finances. Not because the money will be wildly different. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you will be different. You'll see the board. You'll understand the pieces. You'll know which moves are yours to make. And that changes everything. Now, before you go, let me ask you for 3 things. First, if this video meant something to you, if even one question hit you harder than you expected, subscribe to this channel. Walk with us. These conversations only get deeper from here. And every one of the 10 questions I asked tonight is going to become a full video in the coming weeks. You don't want to miss those. Second, share this video with 5 people. 5 people over 40, over 50, over 60. Your brother, your sister, an old friend, a neighbor, a cousin. Someone who needs to hear these questions before it's too late to put the answers to work. Don't explain it to them. Just send it. Let it do the work. And third, leave me a comment. A real one. Tell me which of the 10 questions hit you hardest. Which one you realized you couldn't answer. Which one you've been avoiding for years. And tell me what question you want me to dig into first. Because the next video we make, the first of this whole series, is going to come from you. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people who count on you. And remember, the questions that scare you the most are the questions pointing to exactly where your future is being built, either by you or without you.